10:02 on, thank you. It is 10:02 on February 6, 2023, and it's my pleasure to call to order the Policy and Innovation Committee of SACOG. And I'd like to give a particular welcome to our new members on this committee. Welcome. And we'll get to know you a little bit more after the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you will join me in reciting and honoring our nation's flag. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. May we have the roll call, please?
Sure. And just before roll call, just a few housekeeping announcements. Good morning, everyone. This meeting is being recorded and streamed over the internet. For members of the public, we accept and encourage public comment and have provided options that are listed at the top of this meeting agenda. For our committee members, thank you for joining us today. Please mute your devices when you're not speaking and use the raise hand feature in Zoom should you wish to comment. Okay, directors, when I call your name, please indicate your presence. Director Desmond. Absent. Dowden Cavillo.
Present.
Hadashelt. Absent. Saragosa.
Here.
Schaefer.
Here.
Stollard. Absent. Vang. Director Vang, can you indicate your presence?
Oh, here. Sorry, I didn't hear you. Yeah.
No worries.
I am happily here.
Perfect. Thank you. Vice Chair Burris.
Here.
And Chair Thomas.
Here. All right.
We have a quorum.
So great. So before we move on to the consent calendar, we'd like to provide a particular welcome to Director Schaefer from Citrus Heights, Director Vang from Sacramento, and Director Dowden Cavillo from Auburn. We are delighted to have you on SACOG and delighted to have you as part of this Policy and Innovation Committee. So I'd love to invite you to say a few words about yourself and the city you represent. So Director Schaefer, let's start with you.
Well, thank you very much. I'm excited to be on SACOG. I represent Citrus Heights. I'm the mayor here, just recently elected in December. And a little bit about myself. Certainly, my vocation is I do manufacturing engineering work. I also work with a lot of employers for developing workforce programs. So I'm involved with a local organization called Sacramento Valley Manufacturing Alliance. And this is about 55 companies in most of all of your jurisdictions that are developing talent to really bring more businesses to Sacramento.
Wonderful. Well, welcome, Mayor Schaefer, and congratulations on becoming the mayor of Citrus Heights. Director Vang.
Hi, everyone. Happy Monday. Really excited to be here. I do apologize that I'm still in sweat clothes. I do Monday walks with our seniors at the Pinello Community Center. And so just really excited that I made it back in time to be part of this policy group. But yeah, I'm from the city of Sacramento, born and raised here in the heart of Menivue, a daughter of Hmong refugees. And I'm just so proud to represent everything south of Florin. And really excited that the mayor appointed me to SACOG. I think this body in particular really sets the foundation for how we do planning, thinking about just the way in which the type of conditions we create for our families. And so just really honored actually to be part of this incredible large board and be part of the conversation at the table, building with all of you to ensure that we have a region that works for everyone. And so just really excited to get to work, and it's an honor to be serving alongside all of you. So thank you so much for having me.
Well, it's an honor to have you, your passion, your representation, and your voice for those that you represent. So welcome to the larger collaborative of SACOG, and we're delighted you're here. So Director Dowden Cavillo. Now, did I say that correctly?
So it's Dowden Calvillo, so almost, but Calvillo. So thank you very much, Chair. I appreciate it. I am the mayor of the city of Auburn. I was elected in 2020, and I am very pleased to have the opportunity to serve on SACOG again. And I say again, because I did serve on city council back in Auburn from 1998 until 2005. And so during my previous tenure, I was the city's representative on SACOG for a number of years. And so it's a great opportunity to come back and to continue to serve the city in this new capacity, and appreciate working with all of you. And it's good to see Tom, because Tom was on SACOG when I was on initially. So we were chatting about how we were in the offices where the boardroom had a giant pillar in the middle of it. And so when you were trying to talk to your colleagues, you had to look around this giant pillar. So you have great digs now. But in any event, transportation is incredibly important for our region, and looking forward to serving again on SACOG. So thank you so much.
Well, we're delighted to have you back. Welcome back, and congratulations to you on becoming the mayor of Auburn. So is this your second time as mayor?
Third time.
Third
Third
time.
time.
Third time's a
Yeah.
charm. I love it.
Yes.
Well, welcome back. And I'd like to also thank our vice chair, Trinity Burris. Really glad to have you helping chair this committee this year, and look forward to working with you. And that said, before we move on, I do have a slight disclaimer that we are at noon. We are finally opening our Navigation Center Emergency Shelter. We are one of 4 California counties that has had no shelter for the homeless. And today, after a decades-long battle, we are finally opening our Navigation Center. So it's a big deal for El Dorado County and the city of Placerville. And so I need to open the Nav Center and share that event. So I may have to duck out a little early. So and Trinity will take over. So, all right, with that, do we have any public communications?
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, before we move on, Director Desmond is here.
Great.
I also have Oscar Villegas from Yolo County.
Oh, wonder, Oscar. Fantastic. Welcome. And so, Oscar, so Director Villegas is also a member of this committee?
I believe we're waiting for appointments to be finalized from Yolo County, so he's listening today, but go ahead, Supervisor Villegas.
Perfect. Well, welcome.
Hi, everybody. My
yourself.
apologies. I'm driving. So thank you, Madam Chair, and excited to be a part of the SACOG family. I've served for many terms, I guess I should say, as the backup to the representative, both from the city of West Sacramento and now from Yolo County. And so this will be my first stint as the official representative to SACOG once the board ratifies the assignments tomorrow.
Well, Supervisor Villegas, it's going to be a pleasure to work with you. Welcome. We're delighted to have you on board.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all. So with that, public communications.
There's no public comment at this time.
Okay, wonderful. Now we move on to the consent calendar. Does anyone have any changes? Relations to the consent calendar? If not,
Stellar moves to approve the consent calendar.
Saragosa second.
it's been moved and seconded. May we have the roll call? Is there any public communications on the consent calendar?
There's no public comment.
All right, roll call, please.
Perfect. Directors, when I call your name, please indicate your vote. Director Desmond.
Aye.
Dowden Cavillo.
Aye.
Howdeshell. Absent. Saragosa.
Aye.
Schaefer.
Aye.
Stollard.
Aye.
Vang.
I was actually going to vote aye on all items, except I would like to abstain from item consent 2 because I wasn't part of the minutes. So,
I'll make a note of the record.
okay, thank you.
Vice Chair Burris
Aye.
and Chair Thomas.
Aye, thank you. All right, we move on to action item number 4. Good morning, Loretta.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair and member of the board. My name is Loretta Sue. I'm the Finance Director. The item that I'm presenting today is the audit financial reports. So SACOG, as a metropolitan planning organization and as an agency receiving federal and past due funds, is required to undergo an audit annually. 2 independent audit firms, I. Bailey and Richardson and Company, completed the audits of SACOG financial statements and then also the transit funds and prepared the annual comprehensive financial report and the transit funds audit reports, respectively, for both fiscal year ended June 30th, 2022. SACOG received an unmodified or clean opinion for both audits. Staff is pleased to submit the fiscal year 2021-22 annual comprehensive financial report and related audits for board review and approval. I'm going to quickly go over the attachment included in the item, and then I will turn it over to Ms. Carly Ransom from Bailey to go over the audit process and answer any questions you may have. So included in the staff item is the attachment A, which is the annual comprehensive financial report. This report is broken into several sections. First is the introductory section. This section includes a letter of transmittal, which is an executive summary introducing the financial statement along with other required informations. The second section is the financial sections. This section includes the independent auditor report from Bailey, the management discussion and analysis, which is the management overview of the financial positions and activity during the fiscal year, and a description of how the budget is adopted and managed, and it also identify any major issues, if any, and projection for the futures and the actual financial statement. And then this section is the statistical sections. This section contains various unaudited demographic of Sacramento regions and history of financial statement information of SACOG. And finally is the single audit sections. The single audit section is required for agency that receive federal funds or award in of $750,000 annually, and includes the auditor report on their finding as it related to the federal grant programs. For SACOG, the SACOG did not receive any finding for the single audits in the fiscal year 21-22. So attachment B is a required communications to the SACOG Board of Directors regarding the SACOG financial audit, which address any audit findings, difficulties encountered in performing the audit, or corrected or uncorrected misstatements, and any disagreement with management. Richardson and Company conducted an audit for several transit funds managed by SACOG. This includes the LTF funds audit for the County of Sacramento, Sutter, Yolo, and Yuba, and also SACOG STA and SGR funds. These audits are part of the SACOG Annual Comprehensive Financial Report. So from attachment C through E are the various transit reports that are included with the staff item. Now I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Carly Ransom. She is the senior audit manager from Bailey. So she can go over the audit process and answer any questions you may have related to the financial statement or audits.
Welcome, Carly.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. I'm sharing my screen right now. Can everybody see it? So let me
Perfect.
share. Okay, perfect. So good morning. My name is Carly Ransom, as Loretta mentioned. I'm with Bailey. We are a national accounting auditing firm. We have about 8 offices in California, I think we're up to. And the team who worked through this audit is from our Sacramento office, local governments division, where we focus on audits of local governments such as JPAs, cities, counties, special districts, and similar entities. So on the screen, I'm sharing our audit report that's included in the meeting packet. And I was going to quickly walk through our audit reports as well as the outcomes of the audit. So we were engaged by SACOG to perform external auditing services for the year ended June 30th, 2022. So for our audits, you could essentially segment them into 2 parts. Loretta touched on this a little bit, where first we're doing an audit of the financial statements of SACOG and giving an opinion as to whether those financial statements are materially fairly stated. And then second, we're doing an audit over compliance related to federal funding and grants, which is referred to as a single audit. So at the conclusions of our audits, we provide our final audit reports. Our audit report on the financial statements is on page 37 of 286, which I'm showing here. And then our audit report on compliance the single audit is on page 140. And kind of sandwiched in between the two are the financial statements of SACOG. So as I had mentioned, this first audit report is related to the financial statements. Management of SACOG is responsible for the preparation of the financial statements. And then our responsibility as auditors is to review the financial statements, perform testing over balances, and gather sufficient audit evidence in order to give an opinion on the financials as to whether or not they are accurate and complete. So the most significant part of this audit report is the opinion section, which essentially notes that the financial statements present fairly the financial position of SACOG. So what that means is that we did not have any audit findings or issues or adjustments, and the financial statements appear to be fairly stated and accurate based off of our test work performed. So as part of our audit, we also look at internal controls. For example, is there proper segregation of duties in place in regards to financial transactions, proper approvals and checks and balances? And we did not have any issues related to internal controls to report as well. So for the other audit report, which is on 140, this is our single audit report, which is related to our audit over federal expenditures. So as SACOG receives a large amount of federal funding over various programs, there are certain compliance requirements that need to be met by SACOG that's attached to the funding. So for example, federal funds can only be spent on certain activities and costs related to the program. Another example is procurement. There's strict requirements on the procurement methods used when procuring contracts with vendors with federal funds. So as you read through the report, it notes under the opinion paragraph that SACOG complied in all material respects with the direct and material compliance requirements for the major program. So essentially, there were no compliance issues or findings to report surrounding the federal funding sources that we tested for SACOG. So all in all, for fiscal year 22, it's what we consider a clean audit, no findings to report. At this point, we can take any questions. Otherwise, I want to thank Finance and Loretta for her team for all their help and continued assistance throughout the audit process.
Thank you, Carly, for conducting the audits on our behalf. And I'd just like to congratulate you, Laura, as well as your Loretta and your team for a clean financial audit, which is a significant achievement given the complexity in which SACOG operates and all the items under your purview, whether it's in terms of accounting estimates or judgment or policy. To have a clean, once again, financial audit on both these audits is terrific. So well done. Do any directors have any questions or comments at this point?
Just would echo your comments, and I was, it's a very lengthy document, had the opportunity to go through it, and I do appreciate the outcome and all the attention to detail, and good news for sure.
Thank you so much. Yes, it was quite comprehensive.
Mm-hmm.
Any other director comments? Seeing none, do we have any public comment?
There's no public comment.
Well, I will bring this back to the board for action.
Madam Chair, I'll move that we accept the fiscal year 2021-22 annual comprehensive financial report and related audits.
I'll second that motion.
All right. Dowden Cavillo first and Vang second. Roll call, please.
All right, directors, when I call your name, please indicate your vote. Director Desmond.
Aye.
Dowden Cavillo.
Aye.
Howdeshell. Absent. Saragosa.
Aye.
Schaefer.
Aye.
Stoller.
Aye.
Vang.
Yes.
Vice Chair Burris.
Aye.
And Chair Thomas.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you all. And once again, Loretta, congratulations.
Thank you, Chair.
We appreciate your work. All right, item number 5.
Yeah, so this is our item to adopt our annual charge for the Policy and Innovation Committee. And you'll see some minor changes in the attachment, but what I was hoping to do for the next couple minutes is give especially our newer members to the committee a bigger overview of what the committee does and some questions you may be having about SACOG in general. So this will be an opportunity if you have questions I want to highlight kind of the main areas of responsibility in the committee, and then happy to have any discussion or questions. So with that, I want to start with our financial area. So you heard a little bit from Loretta and our audit team there about SACOG's finances at a high level. This committee is what you'd consider your budget committee, budget and audits committee. And so we'll hear a little bit more from Loretta later on our quarterly report on our budgets. But I think stepping back, one of the things that I think is important to understand about SACOG is you'll be hearing in the next few months about SACOG having its funding round, making funding awards. For those of you that were at the meeting last month, you heard a lot from me about our corrective action and the federal funds that come to SACOG. What's important distinction there is that those funds don't actually reflect in our budget, but as a practical matter, those are federal funds that SACOG directs where those expenditures are awarded to local agencies. So you won't see those showing up in our budgets. However, there are some things like our Green Means Go program where as a peculiarity of how the state awards that did significantly inflate the size of our budget. And so those grants, while we continue to treat them similar to what you'd see in the funding round for transportation projects, those are reflected in our financials. And so you'll see a significant number of pass-through funds reflected in the financial documents. And the other thing that just going into the budget, which will be bringing you a draft in April and a final budget in May, that's really a multi-part document. And you saw some of that if you look at the financial documents of how we structure things. But for federal requirements, we put together something called an overall work program, which is a very detailed budget-like document, but it doesn't fully replace a budget. And so what we bring before this committee is a budget. How do we intend to spend the money as you do with other boards in your local cities and counties? But we also have this planning document that has many federal requirements that are embedded in it. So we have to spell out how are we meeting our requirements under federal and state law for all the planning responsibilities that SACOG has, as well as those transportation programming activities that I talked about. So you'll see some detail there in the coming months about how we structure our work there. So the next piece of the finances I wanted to touch on a little bit, kind of where does the money come from? Right. So SACOG has, it magically appears in our bank account, and there's nothing we have to worry about, right? But,
right.
We'll talk about advocacy in a couple minutes, right? But certainly it is something that we diligently have to work together as a region on. And so it's a combination of transportation funds from gas taxes, both at the state and federal level, that flow through these formulas that come down to metropolitan regions. And so you'll see that reflected when you look at the budget in terms of where's the money coming from. But you'll also see some one-time grants and things. So at the state level, one significant one-time grant is the Green Means Go, as well as the regional early action planning funds that are coming through the state housing and community development department. And then on the federal side, we're really happy last year, SACOG got a $5 million grant. It's called a RAISE grant. If you're hearing the lingo about all the different competitive grants we have to go out for. And so that's a planning grant going to SACOG that's really going to help us do a lot of work. And you'll hear more about that in the coming months. But those are the types of things that kind of come in and fund our activities. And then the final piece I wanted to touch on is our board and advocacy budget. And so one really critical thing we have is unlike most cities and counties where you're relying a lot on local revenues to pay for your operations, local funds are actually a very, very small part of our budget. And so we rely on contributions from cities and counties to fund many of our advocacy activities, as well as strategic priorities of the board that really kind of go outside of the traditional thinking of the state and federal planning activities. So things like our Youth Leadership Academy, as well as some of our just regional convening activities, those are all paid for through the member assessments that we have every year. So I'm happy to answer any questions anybody might have about our finance and operations, but just wanted to kind of center that that's part of what this committee will focus on this year.
And I just have to give a shout out to our SACOG staff that while our financial operations and budget is incredibly complex, our SACOG staff makes it quite simple and user-friendly for us all to digest and deal with. So I just want to acknowledge our exceptional staff. Now, are there any questions or comments on the financial operations piece of our committee? I don't see any. All right. Great. Thank you, Eric.
Yes, so briefly on advocacy, it's another important part. It's not in the name necessarily of the committee, but the policy part is really what we're speaking to a lot of the state and federal advocacy. And so we'll hear from our state level lobbyists in a few minutes, and you'll also be taking action on our advocacy principles. So, we operate from the board setting policy direction and framework for kind of what we advocate for. And then we have a staff team and federal and state level lobbyists who go out and carry out that on your behalf. And you'll hear about that in a couple minutes. So I don't think there's anything else to say there. And then just, closing out on a couple things that are also reflected in the committee charge here. Typically, this is the committee that kind of oversees all the other administrative things that SACOG is responsible for. And so one thing that's coming out is the specific reference to Civic Lab, which was an initiative that we started up several years ago. And I think the components of that will be reflected on our work going forward. But all the other things that when you hear Sacramento Area Council of Governments, it's the Council of Governments piece that our strategic plan and our joint powers agreement says that if all the cities and counties want to do something collectively, that SACOG is enabled to do that. And so we would want to bring those things here and have your input on new initiatives. So just to close out here, one final addition to the charge that you see noted in the last underlined line is there are some transit funds. And so while we have a transportation committee that deals with the funding awards that SACOG makes, this is more of an administrative thing where funds flow to transit operators kind of by formula, but SACOG has a role in oversight. And part of that was captured in the audits that we just spoke to. And so given that there's a real financial focus to these funds, we thought it was better to align them with the Policy and Innovation Committee this year. So that's the only other change I had in the Policy and Innovation Committee charge. So with that, happy to take any other questions, Madam Chair, but recommending an action to approve the charge as amended.
Any director questions at this point? I do have, it's seeing none, I do have a couple, if I might. One of our charges is overseeing the engagement of regional local elected officials and staff. And it talks about forums, tours, and other special events. Am I correct in understanding that we are set to have board meetings in different locations this year? So we can, so we can get to know our broad and diverse region?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll let James speak to that.
Yeah, Chair Thomas, thanks for bringing that up. That's exactly right. And in fact, we talked a little bit at the board meeting in January about our racial equity action plan, which has the board worked on the last 2 years, and we did a little bit of an update for people last Thursday who were interested, new board members and returning board members. Part of our racial equity action plan is about engagement. Part of it is about trying to understand, and you've been a real champion for this, the real diversity of our region, right? Both in terms of race, ethnicity, in terms of income, in terms of urban, rural. And so rather than, we have gone in the past and taken board members on tours to different metropolitan regions around the country, really this next couple of years, try to focus on our own region a little bit more and better understand the challenges right here in the 6 counties. And so 3 offsite board meetings are planned this year. So usually we'll be in our office in downtown Sacramento, but April, August, and October this year, we were planning to hit 3 different counties and take the sort of the board meeting on the road, as it were, and then we thought it would be great to actually hit the other 3 counties next year too. So we could actually rotate around the region, at least have 1 meeting in each county over the 2-year period. And then the board workshop, which you didn't really have in January, this I'm speaking really to the new board members now, but we often have a sort of a 45 to 60-minute workshop. It's a deep dive on a topic that will ideally come before the board or really is of interest to our work. And our hope for these offsite board meetings is we would do a deep dive on the local community, and in particular around a lot of things in our racial equity action program, like community engagement and understanding the challenges of a particular community and jurisdiction, looking at community planning, looking at disparities. So that's the goal for these offsite board workshops.
I just want to applaud that because I think that's going to be really meaningful as we all come to the table and make regional decisions. It's going to be so helpful to have a deeper understanding of all of our respective jurisdictions and the challenges that we face in order to make a better comprehensive decision for the greater whole, as well as in representation of our own district. So I think this is really exciting. Just applaud that. And the last question I have is this committee oversees innovation. So what is the process for determining new innovative programs? Does it usually the staff bring items forward for our committee to consider, or do individual committee members bring ideas forward that they would like us to consider? What's the process on that?
That's a great question, Chair Thomas. I don't know that there's no wrong door really, right? I think we're interested to see the local knowledge from all of your jurisdictions bring forward, but also we do put together an annual work plan. And so we talked briefly about that last year, but certainly we want to kind of adapt year to year. We have a strategic plan that the board adopted last year, but we're always interested in different ways of seeing that through to success. And so we'll bring some staff ideas through, but certainly we will always want feedback on how we're doing and achieving what we're trying to accomplish.
Sounds great. I think that's
Chair Thomas, if I can pick up on that too. I really appreciate that question. I was just communicating with Eric earlier about, unlike say a transportation committee where you're going to be focused on transportation, right? We wanted to really spend a little bit of time this morning, especially because we have so many members who are new to the board. What is the charge? What does this committee cover? Because it is an interesting mix of certain things, right? And you have innovation in your title, as you're pointing out. And let me just say this again, partly for some of the new members joining us. Eric mentioned we have a new strategic plan, which is intentionally short. And the last page has six ways in which we believe not just SACOG, but our region has to be successful. One of those is innovation. When we say innovation, we don't necessarily mean just technology. It is innovation is, I think, an overused word. People love to throw it around, that's innovative. We actually mean solving problems creatively. And sometimes in a lean way, with a small budget, right? So like being very creative about how we solve problems. If technology is part of that, that's great. And we had a program here called Civic Lab, and you'll probably see that kind of crossed out in your charge. Early on, pre-pandemic, early on in my tenure, ran a program that some of you were part of around trying to solve first mobility problems and then issues about revitalization in commercial corridors. And that I think was a great example of innovation because it was really about how do we tackle tough, sticky, thorny problems, right, creatively. And sometimes that means it is, those are not just the high-tech stuff, but also the lean and on a budget kinds of things. So I wanted to throw that definition out there for you. And also, I think as Eric is doing, invite any of you as members of the board to think a little bit about creative approaches, both as an agency, as a region, things that are happening in your own jurisdictions that you all can learn from. So I'm filling in a little bit of the, in addition to all the charge and what's been laid out in front of you, I think those creative methods of solving problems, frankly, are sort of our only path to success, because we don't have any other alternative other than to be creative and solve problems on a shoestring. So hope that helps.
That does, and thank you. I think that's helpful for us all to understand what are our opportunities on this committee. So thank you so much for that. Any other final thoughts before we go to public comment? Is there massive public comment on this, Robert?
No public comment on this item.
Oh, wow, all right. Do I have a motion in a second?
Dowden
First,
Calvillo
motion
will,
approval.
I'll second. Dowden Calvillo second.
All right. All right, roll call, please.
I'm sorry, who was the motion from?
First,
First, all right, thank you so much. Okay, directors, when I call your name, please indicate your vote. Director Desmond.
Aye.
Dowden Calvillo.
Aye.
Haudashelt. Absent. Saragosa.
Aye.
Schaefer.
Aye.
Stollard.
Aye.
Vang.
Yes.
Vice Chair Burris.
yes.
And Chair Thomas.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you for that discussion and appreciate that. All right, item number 6.
Good morning, Chair Thomas and committee members. Sabrina Bradbury, SACOG staff, here to present the advocacy principles. It's an action item before you. Staff is recommending that this committee recommend that the board approve the 2023 advocacy principles. We did not make any changes to these principles from the 2022 version. These principles guide our advocacy efforts and give board direction to staff on which bills and legislative actions to engage on, taking positions on bills, for example, or engaging on budget advocacy. And there will be on your advocacy update, I'll touch on the procedures for how and when we go to the board, but essentially, when there is a bill or policy issue that aligns very clearly with these advocacy principles, it allows staff to engage and then report back to the board when we're taking positions on bills. I'd be happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you, Sabrina. Are there any questions on our principles? Dowden Calvillo.
Yes, just really quickly, I believe when I was reading this, it was these principles. Did I see something about advocating for affordable housing? It was these principles, not the federal, correct? And if so, I just was wondering how much of our efforts are really focused on that. I understand it's affordable housing within a transportation area, but if you could just kind of expand upon that. I know, our primary focus truly is transportation, and I know that we also are kind of advocating a little bit on flood control, but it's easy to argue that, that impacts transportation as well. But if you could just maybe touch upon that a little bit, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, great question. First, for this year in particular, we're going to be focusing a lot of our effort on our sponsored legislation, which we'll get an update from our lobbyists on that. And that's to extend the timeline for adoption on our blueprint, or our Metropolitan Transportation Plan Sustainable Community Strategy. And so these principles are really just trying to reflect where blueprint implementation comes in. So that's both on the land use and transportation side. And how do we, maximize our transportation system where jobs and housing and land use play into having a more efficient system. And I don't know, James, if you want to elaborate on that piece of it.
Yeah, I definitely do. Director Dowden Calvillo, I appreciate the question, and I just want to back up for a second, because this is really an important point, which is I think a lot of people think of SACOG and sometimes join SACOG because of what they know in terms of transportation. But all the way back to our blueprint plan in 2004, I'm sure you remember all of this, right?
I went through that. Yep, I remember.
Yep. And as do some veteran members here, I was part of that as well. And we're even branding our upcoming long range plan blueprint, because we understand that really growth and land use and housing and development really is the underpinning of a successful region. And if we just think about transportation in a silo, we will never be successful. So the reason we have a land use and natural resources committee of the board is not because we're getting into building affordable housing, but because housing and growth and development is so important. The state over time has also, the state of California, given us more housing, more position on housing. The regional housing needs allocation, or RHNA, was something that we do every 8 years, was last done in 2019. And our green means go. Speaking of innovation, and I was going to say this, right? The success of our plan, of our long-range transportation plan, and reducing pollution and carbon emissions from transportation is actually a land use strategy, depends on all of you, and depends on money to get housing at all levels, including affordable housing. And we've had more state money. So I just want to make sure that everybody sort of understands that and even our revised strategic plan last year, I think, was very clear around growth, development, air quality. Transportation is part of a bigger mix. And Eric mentioned this too. If you even go back to our Joint Powers Authority, the charge of this Council of Governments is to solve the big problems in the region, right? That are bigger than any one jurisdiction to solve. It is true that over time, a lot of the ways in which we have been devolved transportation funding and policy and authority has made us build out a transportation practice. But I just want to make sure that everybody is clear as you enter this board. We are very determined that we're not just a transportation agency, and we have to think about growth and development and disaster preparedness and climate change and all the rest of it.
So I do appreciate that. And I haven't gone through Blueprint, for a number of years. I understand that and appreciate that. I just was really wanting to focus on that, how much advocacy was placed on affordable housing. You're saying that really it's in the context of Blueprint and so forth. So that kind of explained or addressed my issue. So I do appreciate that.
Yeah. I just thought I would use your question to
yes.
pop back a little bit and just, orient everybody. Because believe me, we still have a lot of these discussions at a board level with a lot of our more veteran members, the relative balance of focus. But I think it's important just to remind all of you or introduce you to the scope, the pretty diverse portfolio that we have.
And I'll echo in here as well, because this is always a big issue for me. And I know a couple of folks heard this at the REI refresh, was that, when we talk about affordable housing, and this is in the context of all of us from a regional perspective, as well as from our individual jurisdictions, is, as we look at REI and equity, and we look at affordable housing, that we don't just look at this as rentals and apartments, but we look at it as the opportunity for people to move into home ownership and to have that opportunity as we move forward. Again, like I said, it's the only way, as far as I know at this point, to really build generational wealth outside of, some really great jobs that somebody may have, but to have that opportunity, and especially in communities of color where we've seen historically not having those opportunities to get into home ownership. So as I mentioned at the last meeting, and I love it that we're going to have, the EDD building and others build, potentially thousands of units downtown. Unfortunately, none of those are going to probably be home ownership. I mean, I hope some of them will be, maybe some mixed use, but affordable housing, I think, needs to be in the context of ownership, should be a central part of what we talk about as well here at SACOG.
Thank you. Helpful discussion. And my final comment is, under the transportation principles, I so appreciate the emphasis on flexibility and funding rather than a one size fits all, recognizing that our region as well as our needs are incredibly diverse. So really appreciate that. Great. Any other further comments? All right. Any public comment?
There's no public comment.
Thank you, Robert. I'll bring it back to the board for action.
Saragosa moves.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
All right, directors, when I call your name, please indicate your vote. Director Desmond. Aye. Dowden Cavillo,
Aye.
Haudashelt, absent. Zaragoza,
Aye.
Schaefer,
Aye.
Stollard,
Aye.
Vang,
Yes.
Vice Chair Burris. Vice Chair Burris, if you could indicate your vote. Absent, and Chair Thomas.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. All right, we are now on item number 7. I believe that's yours, Eric.
Is so another context setting for the organization, not necessarily a significant discussion here, but when we step back and look at what your federal responsibilities are as a metropolitan planning organization, there's many different things that SACOG is required to do. And among those is a focus on governance. One of those requirements is that transit in particular is reflected and represented in how the governing body thinks about its decisions. And so since we have focused as an organization through your Joint Powers Authority on having only cities and counties be the members of SACOG, we're addressing the need for transit representation by adopting this resolution annually, where those of you who sit on transit agency boards, when you come to SACOG, in addition to thinking about the differences between you as a local directly elected official and an appointed member to SACOG, that you're also considering your role as a transit board member when you're voting at SACOG and bringing issues forward. In particular, from what you're learning on those transit agency boards is really helpful to the discussion here at SACOG because we do have both planning and funding for the region for transit agencies that comes through SACOG, even though they're separate boards for transit. So this resolution before you just identifies that. And for reference as well on our website, we do indicate those of you who we know are on transit agency boards. If you happen to have been appointed to a transit agency board in the last couple of weeks, I know there's lots of appointments that are still underway. It's really helpful if you can let us know about that as well. If you just let Lynette, our clerk, know, we'll make sure that that's reflected on our website so that people know who is on transit agency boards from SACOG. So our recommendation is approval of the resolution.
Excellent. Thank you, Eric. Any questions or comments?
Just a really quick question. When you talk about the transit board, so I sit on Placer County Transportation Planning Agency. Would that suffice? I mean, we have Auburn Transit, but.
So it's specifically the transit
authority. Oh,
correct.
okay.
So it would be Auburn Transit or Placer County Transit, not the RTPA boards.
Got it. Just wanted clarification. Thank you so much.
Good question. All right. I think I heard Director Desmond move the
Yes,
item.
I move approval.
Stallard seconds.
Any public comment?
There is no public comment.
All right, roll call, please.
All right, directors, when I call your name, please indicate your vote. Director Desmond.
Aye.
Dowden Cavillo.
Aye.
Haudashelt, absent. Zaragoza,
Aye.
Schaefer,
Aye.
Stollard,
Aye.
Vang,
Yes.
Vice Chair Burris. Vice Chair Burris, if you can indicate your vote. Absent, and Chair Thomas.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We now move into our information section with item 8 being the fiscal year 2023 year-to-date budget status. So Loretta, you're up again.
Thank you. Just give me one moment to share my screen here. Hey, just want to confirm that can see my screen.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, Chair. So yeah, thank you, Eric, for providing an overview of all the different funding sources that Sacramento region receive for transportation and infrastructure related projects. And also noted that not all those fundings are included in the SACOG budget because those are mostly directly programmed or awarded to member jurisdictions. So this morning, I'm going to be focused on just an overview of the revenue source that are included in SACOG budgets and also to provide an overview of the budget to actual comparisons for the 6 months period ending December 31st, 2022. Let's start with the revenue source. SACOG, as a federally designated metropolitan planning organizations, receive transportation, air quality, and other regional funds for the coordinated metropolitan planning for the 6 county Sacramento regions. This includes the FHWA Transportation Planning Funds, the Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality, or what they call CMAQ funds, and also the FTA Transit Planning Funds. SACOG, as Eric mentioned, that also received discretionary grants, such as the RACE grant that was recently received, and then also the Next Generation Transit Initiative Fund that was funded through the American Rescue Plan Act. And at the state level, SACOG received SB1 formula funds, the transportation planning and programming funds, and then also SACOG as a designated to operate the Capital Valley Region Service Authority for Freeways and Expressway, short SAFE, for the El Dorado, Sacramento, San Joaquin, Sutter, Yolo, and Yuba counties. The revenue for the SAFE are collected through a $1 fee assessed at the time of vehicle registrations in the participating counties. Also, as Eric noted earlier, that SACOG also received the one-time state funding, which include the REAP housing program and also the Green Means Go, and then additionally Caltrans planning grants that are awarded annually based on competitive applications submitted. And at the local level, SACOG receive a planning and administrative fees for administering the Sacramento, Yolo, Yuba, and Sutter County TDA program. The funds from this program is derived from the quarter cents of the sales tax on collected for the 4 counties. And then SACOG also received membership dues from the 22 cities and 4 counties that we serve. And then also is a fee related to the airport land use planning. So these are different funding sources that are directly included in SACOG budgets. Let me just give you a quick overview of what the combined budget revenue looks like. The total combined revenue for the 3 budgets that SACOG manage is approximately $43.2 million. 25% is from the federal revenue source, 48% is from the state, mainly is the Green Means Go and also the REAP housing program. Local revenue makes up about 12%. DMV fees and membership due is approximately 9%, and other revenue sources about the remaining 6%. For the 6 months ended December 31st, 2022, total revenue received is approximately $13.1 million, and it's approximately 30% of the budgeted revenue for the fiscal year. As noted, because of the one-time funding from the state and on the Green Means Go program and also the REAP housing, this is one of the area that we are working on with member jurisdiction to make sure that they are there, submitted the timely invoices, and also because the project is at the early implementation stage right now, so that's why the revenue is a lot lower than what we projected. Obviously, this is depending on the timing of when the member jurisdiction is working in completing the projects that was awarded in those programs. So as needed, we will be reviewing and making the adjustment to the budgets as needed throughout the fiscal year.
And Loretta, just before we move on to the expenditures, just to highlight for the board members, so most of our state and federal funds are received on a reimbursement basis. So while we've completed half the fiscal year, The 30% that you see there in received revenues is largely a reflection of what Loretta is pointing out, that the work hasn't started on many of these activities, and so the revenues haven't come in yet.
Thank you, Eric. Yeah. Any questions before I move on to expenditures?
Any questions? Not seeing any, Loretta. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so on the combined expenditure side, again, total expenditure is budgeted to be 43.2 million for the fiscal year. Salary and benefits makes up about 29% of the budgets. Consulting costs 14%. Again, pass-through costs make up the majority of the expenses for the budgets of 45%. Other costs and indirect costs makes up the remaining 12%. For the 6 months ended December 31st, 2022, total expenditures is approximately 10.1 million comparing to 43.2 million, or approximately 23%. As noted, so operating expenses such as salaries, indirect costs, and other costs are within the approximate, what we budgeted for the fiscal year, approximately 50%. However, as Eric noted, obviously the pass-through cost is trail budgets by quite a bit, as noted earlier. It's related to the REAP housing and also the Green Means Go. The REAP housing is a project that to support the adoption and the implementations of the member jurisdiction housing elements. Majority of the housing elements are completed and approved by HCD. However, the delay in getting the approval, which delayed some of the housing projects that was included in that budget. So that has resulted in the lower pass-through cost. And also the Green Means Go is a one-time funding from the state for to provide more infill housing, increase mobility, and reduce vehicle emission in the 6-county green zone area. The award was total of 38 million. However, this project is in the early stage of implementation right now. So that's also resulted in the lower than budgeted pass-through costs, as you see here. Staff will continue to assess the project progress throughout the fiscal year and make any amendment to the budget as necessary. Any questions before I move on to the next slide?
I'm not seeing any, Loretta. Thank you.
Okay, so here's just a quick overview of the one of the 3 budgets. This is the SIGCOG operation budgets. This is the biggest budgets SIGCOG manage. This budget includes the OWP projects and activities for transportation, air quality, and other planning objectives that support SIGCOG 3 strategic goal, and also the 2002 to 2025 work plans. Some of the projects included are the Mega Region Working Group, the Racial Equity Implementation Plan, Innovative Mobility Solutions, the Mileage-Based Pricing Pilot, Next Generation Transit Initiative, and of course the Green Means Go project that were highlighted earlier. Salary and benefit makes up about 31% of the budgets. Consulting costs 12%, and pass-through costs is 48%. Indirect and other costs is about 9% of the total budgets there. Again, I think overall it's operating expenses like salary, benefits, indirect costs, those are within the budgets. A little bit trailing on the consulting cost. This is due to the closing out the Connect Card project. So that is happening in January. So that expense will be reflected in January. And then the pass-through cost is way below budget. It's resulted due to the Green Means Go and the REAP housing program as discussed earlier. Next, I'm going to move into the board and advocacy budget. This budget is it's included technical assistant, board activities, and advocacy work. Total budget is approximately 1.1 million, and it's funded with membership dues. Activities are slightly below what we budgeted for the 6-month period. However, the expenditures in each category is due to timing of expenditures. So this is not representative of the overall budget, but just a 6 months look. As we progress throughout the year, some of these expenditures will catch up, so not. Staff cost is approximately 47% of the budgets. Board expenses 23% and consulting costs is 20%. This is mainly the advocacy work provided by the consultant, and other costs is 10%. Okay. Finally, is the SAFE expenditures. This budget is total approximately 3.1 million, and it's mainly for implementing, operating, and maintaining the motorist aid system for the call boxes and also the 511 operations within the counties of El Dorado, Sacramento, San Joaquin, Sutter, Yolo, and Ubers. The revenues is funded with DMV fees, as I mentioned earlier. Consulting costs is approximately 28% of the budgets. Pass-through costs is 38%. And then staff costs is about 17%. And then other direct costs is 17%. Again, it's overall is about 46% compared to budget, but individual percentage spent in each category varies. Those are also due to timing of expenditures. For more information included in the staff item is the attachment A, which included the combined summary of revenue and expenditures for the 3 budgets. And also attachment B is the expenditure by projects. So feel free to take a look. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer that.
Thank you, Loretta.
Thank you.
Thank you for helping us, for breaking it down so clearly and recognizing that this represents a great deal of work to break down this and get to this point. So any other questions from directors? Any public comment, Robert?
There's no public comment.
All right, and so this is not an action item, so thank you so much, Loretta, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Item number 9, Mega Region Working Group Meeting. Dustin, you're up. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you, Chair Thomas. Good morning, directors. My name is Dustin Foster. I'm a planner on the transportation team here at SACOG. I staff the Mega Region Working Group, which held its first meeting, its first of 3 meetings on January 27th. A little bit on the working group. It is a partnership of 12 Northern California elected officials, which includes 4 representatives each from SACOG, the Metropolitan Transportation Commission in the Bay Area, and the San Joaquin Council of Governments. In total, that's 16 counties, 136 cities, and nearly 11 million people. So, you know, those big numbers should show that this work is very critical for our state. The working group's mission is to, and our mega region, the mission is to tackle shared transportation challenges and better connect the people and economies of the mega region. So at the first meeting, Director Gore was nominated as chair. The chairship rotates between the 3 agencies this year. This means SACOG is in the lead for planning all of the meetings. Attachment A has the full roster. On the SACOG representation side, we have Director Joyner, Director Kozlowski, and Director Bradford. At the meeting, opening remarks were provided by Assembly Member Ivy R. Curry. She provided support for the mega region effort and also discussed her legislative priorities, which includes the sponsorship of the bill to extend SACOG's long-range plan, the MTP SCS, or blueprint, as we're calling it, which we've discussed quite a bit today, so I don't know how much further I have to go into that. The agenda included adoption of priorities for the Mega Region Group for the year, a funding update on the Mega Region Dozen transportation project priorities, and a legislative update. So attachment B has that agenda. The 4 adopted priorities include supporting the Mega Region Dozen transportation projects, which might be redundant. We're going to talk a lot about that this year. Coordinated planning, again, extending our long-range plan bill, and as well as continuing work on electric vehicles and electrification and roadway pricing. We had a funding update where staff from MTC, SJCOG, and SACOG provided updates on the 12 projects. They are included in attachment C, which is a brochure which provides information on all these projects. And then finally, there was a legislative update. Again, we went over the bill to extend SACOG's blueprint. And MTC staff covered the transit fiscal crisis, where there are projected shortfalls for transit operations in the coming years, and their requests for additional state funds to support. Meeting notes should be provided in an attachment D. Sorry. And with that, I will pause and allow James to provide any further details that he'd want to pause for any questions or comments from the directors. Thank you.
Thank you, Dustin. Appreciate it. James, do you have any additions to Dustin's summary?
No, I think that was a great summary. Maybe I would just say again, for the purpose of some of the newer board members, we've been at this now, I think, we've sort of revitalized this mega region working group since 2020. And interestingly, the reason we were able to do that was because of Zoom. Trying to get 12 elected officials across Northern California together in person proved to be pretty challenging, and actually our ability to meet remotely really enabled some really good work. And former SACOG board chair Lucas Frerichs deserves a lot of credit for reinvigorating this group. And you're going to hear more about this year, both from Dustin as the project manager on the working group, also at the board meeting, hopefully also at Cap to Cap, because we have more money now, as you all know, for infrastructure, transportation in general, but passenger rail in particular than ever before, state level, and in particular the federal level. So this is one where we're going to need everybody's assistance, even beyond just those SACOG board members on the working group. When I went back to Cap last spring, honestly, this effort and the projects and the detail we're able to give to our congressional delegation, the Federal Railroad Administration, all across the Hill, this is one of the most exciting things they'd heard about. Tons of questions. So just a lot more to come on this, and definitely will appreciate in advance your help and your advocacy on it in particular.
Appreciate that. And I certainly appreciate the directors that are taking part in that, and Chair Gore for stepping up to chair that. That is exciting that SACOG is at the head of the table on this important work. So thank you for that. Any other final comments? Once again, this is an information item. So thank you so much, Dustin. We really appreciate the summary.
Yeah, thank you.
The next item, we are on the Legal Services Review of Policies and Procedures.
All right, thank you, Chair. It's Mike Maurer from BBK, SACOG's General Counsel. I will try to share a screen and do a real quick summary report here for you.
Thank you, Mike.
All right, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
All right, so I'll run through this real quick. What I want to go over is just a quick summary of the role of SACOG's General Counsel. We were going to do this a little bit at the last board meeting, but there were some time constraints. So I will very quickly go through this for you here and then talk about what we're going to be looking at over this year. So just so you know, the role of SACOG's General Counsel, the approach that I take to it is what I'd refer to as the legal department approach, where we're providing support to both the board and to all of SACOG staff. And we really want to do that in a way that we leverage the resources we have at our firm. And I look at myself as essentially the head of the department, where, SACOG, as we covered, does a lot of different things. There are a lot of things that could come up. We mentioned affordable housing and how that could come up. And really my goal is figuring out what resources we have that we could leverage to that, whether that's in-house or outside. SACOG does use outside counsel that we coordinate with as well. And one of the things I emphasize as being general counsel to an agency like SACOG is to stay mission focused. So this is really to understand what SACOG's mission is and to think of how we deliver legal services along those lines. So it's important that we understand the strategic plan, including the triple bottom line, which I think the members of this committee are fairly familiar with, and to incorporate things like understanding SACOG's racial equity action plan. It's also about being collaborative. So, you know, I bring that up only because I'm sure many of you think of attorneys as being much more confrontational than collaborative. But we are an agency that serves its members, and each of your member agencies have city attorneys, other staff who may want to work with SACOG on something, and we want to be here to be a resource. And then same thing, I'm glad we had the discussion earlier about the charge about creativity and innovation, because I just want to emphasize that that's part of our charge too as a general counsel department. You know, SACOG is looking to solve problems creatively, and we're looking to help SACOG be able to do that. So again, I know that's not how you always think about attorney services necessarily, but that's how we want to do it for SACOG. And this meeting's being recorded, so you get to throw this back on me if you ever think I'm I'm not being creative or innovative enough for you. I'm gonna, except I will note one thing, you know, just one consideration, you know, as the SACOG board, it's fairly similar to your city or counties that you work for. One thing I will note, just as sort of a public service announcement and something we'll get into with the policies, is there's the Levine Act, which you may be hearing the state recently extended to cities. This creates a conflict of interest rule that relates to campaign contributions. And so in the past, it never applied to city and counties. Now it does. But the FPPC said it doesn't apply to contributions received in 2022, only going forward. However, for appointed boards like SACOG, it does apply going back to 2022. So it only comes up if it has to do with, you know, entitlements or licenses, which we don't really do, but it does apply to contracts. So it's important that you may be getting advice as you're getting onboarded with your city or county to say this only applies to campaign contributions received in 2023 going forward, but actually for SACOG, you'll have to be aware of it. So I bring it up because it's one of those things that maybe we think about how that's reflected in our policies going forward. So really what we want to talk about today is, you know, doing a review of the SACOG policies that the board and staff follow. So obviously your governing documents are two key documents. It's your joint powers agreement, which runs SACOG, and then the bylaws, which is how the board operates. We're not touching the joint powers agreement as part of this. That's something that goes back to each member agency. But we do want to take a look at the bylaws just as something that, you know, hasn't necessarily been done in some time, and we want to take some fresh eyes on it. There are other applicable board policies that are part of your package, the equal opportunity anti-harassment policy, the travel policy, which has to do with how the board members can get reimbursed, and then the board code of conduct, which has to do how board members are expected to you know, conduct themselves at meetings and in the public and things like that. And then we also have our administrative policies. And so these are things that govern how SACOG operates. And part of what we want to do is take a look at these. And I note that we're really looking at these in light of some of the changes that SACOG's made recently. You know, even though this is something that's fairly mundane in a lot of ways, looking at operating policies, we still want to make sure that from the legal sense, we're looking at them with an eye towards what the agency's strategic plan is, and then with an eye towards other agency values like the Racial Equity Action Plan. And it's not that there's anything specific that, you know, I have in mind that we're going to write, you know, we're not going to rewrite the bylaws so that it reads the same as the strategic plan. But I want to emphasize for this committee that we're reviewing them with that context in mind. And what we're going to be doing is coming up with some drafts and presenting them to this committee for a review. And so I bring that up because we'd also look to you to keep those things in mind. We want to, as I said at the beginning, we want to stay mission focused. We want to think about the values and how those carry through to even things like our agency policies. So I threw this up here. I can't take credit for this slide. It's one of my partners, Frank Splendorio, put this together. I had asked him when we came here, what's a framework that you can look at something like bylaws? And he provided me with these 4 C's, and I think it's simple and brilliant. So really, we'll bring this back as a framework when we're looking at things like bylaws and policies, but ultimately we'll be coming back to this committee with some things to propose. We'll provide a framework, and we'd love to get feedback that go along these lines. The last thing I'll say is I do have one of my colleagues, Annie Branham, is on the line. She's here just as an attendee, but going forward, Annie's going to be helping me a lot with these policies and maybe joining some of your policy and innovation committee meetings going forward where this is discussed. So we're happy to take feedback right now, although of course we'll be bringing this at a future meeting. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Great. Thank you so much, Mike. Love the 4 Cs, and as well as your refreshing take on legal services. Appreciate it. Any director comments or questions at this point?
I was just gonna, this is Dowden Calvillo, and I appreciate that. And having served in government for more than 36 years now at the state and local level and a million different positions elected and appointed, I'd be happy to help out on the bylaws if as needed. So if we're gonna have a subcommittee or something, or any of that governance stuff, I enjoy, and so happy to help.
Thank you so much.
Great, thank you.
Appreciate it. Any other comments?
Sure.
Director Zaragoza.
I just wanted to make a comment, Mike. I appreciate all you do in BBK. I know you guys came in you guys got jumped right into a fire and rose to the occasion. And I just want to say I appreciate what you do for us, how you've been doing it, and what you'll do going forward. I look forward to the work here, and to echo Alice's comments, happy to help in any way as I can as well. As Alice and I are former colleagues as well in one of our former appointed lives. So I'm happy to help in that regard too.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. All right. Appreciate the update, Mike, and look forward to further discussions on that. And now we're on item 11, an update on federal and state advocacy. Welcome back, Sabrina.
Good morning again, directors. I have our state lobbyist here, Kiana Valentine, who I'm going to turn it over to give a state update first, and then we'll circle back on the federal update and just general advocacy procedures. So with that, Kiana.
Welcome, Kiana.
Thank you, Chair Thomas, and good morning, directors. Nice to see you all again after our in-person attendance at last month's board meeting. I am going to endeavor to share a slide deck with you. I think I have that capacity. And while I'm pulling that up, I just want to let you know, Chris Lee will hopefully be joining us momentarily. We are pulling double duty today, and he's presenting to another committee this morning. So let's see here.
How nice that Zoom allows us to do that.
I know, or not. I don't know. I think it goes both ways. So, is everyone able to see the slide deck?
Yes, Kiana, thank you.
Zoom quit unexpectedly. Let's hope that is not true. I got a warning notice. Okay. So I want to just briefly introduce myself really quick to those who
Uh-oh. Your presentation went away and you froze briefly.
Yes, Zoom is telling me it's crashing. So this is why in-person is ultimately better, right? Let me try that again. My apologies. And if for some reason it crashes again, we'll just forward you the slides and I can talk you through the information. Apologies.
Hasty in my praise of Zoom.
Okay, let's see. It says I'm sharing the screen. Confirming, able to see it. Wonderful. Okay. So I think I was in the middle of saying I'll just briefly introduce myself again momentarily in case not all of you were at the board meeting in January. I'm Kiana Valentine. I'm a partner with Politico Group, have been with the firm for about 4 years now. And prior to that, spent just about 12 years in service to the California State Association of Governments, or CSAC. Director Villegas was in fact one of my policy committee chairs when I was there, and I know Chair Thomas, you worked with Chris Lee closely in his previous capacity at CSAC. We are former colleagues at CSAC and now colleagues once again at Politico Group. He just joined the firm about 6 months ago. Politico Group has been a firm doing full service public advocacy, public affairs, state advocacy since 1974. And we're really known for our specialty in infrastructure issues. And then of course, with the addition of Chris and I, local and regional governance issues, our focus primarily on housing, land use, and transportation issues, as well as climate change and CEQA. So really a lot of the very issues SACOG is deeply ingrained in and working on. And so we are just so thrilled to be working with you all and on your behalf as your state advocates in Sacramento. So let's see if I can advance the slide deck. There we go. Quickly, we wanted to give you an update, an outline of the issues that we're going to be touching on today. An update on AB 350. That slide has been updated since we last saw you. We have a bill number now for SACOG sponsored bill that would provide for the extension of the MTP SCS. We wanted to run through some legislative membership and SACOG delegation changes just to set the groundwork for who in the region is doing what on your behalf in the legislature. We're going to touch on some legislative, how did I do that? Okay, and executive administrative policy issues that we think are at the top of the agenda this year and will be pulled into whether we like it or not, if you will. And then finally, a quick review of the governor's 23-24 budget that he introduced in January 10, on January 10th. So as I mentioned, I'm just gonna roll right through the slides. Please raise a hand or jump in if you want me to pause or if there's questions. I am limited in who I can see on the screen while I'm presenting, so just feel free to, jump in if you need anything. So as we've previously reported, on behalf of SACOG, we approached Assemblymember Aguirre Curry about sponsoring the legislation to give SACOG a timeline extension for the RTP SCS that is due in a couple of years, or if we are successful on this legislation, into 2025. She was a well thought out choice. You have many strong members in your delegation, but her role as chair of the local government committee in the assembly, as well as sort of representing jurisdictions in the SACOG region, but also into the Bay Area region too, gives her a strong connection to the need for the legislation. And just generally, she's a really good bill author and is a strong champion for issues that her district and constituents care about. So as you all know, as we've talked about, the extension legislation would provide SACOG a couple of extra years to get the RTP SCS done. And there are two key components, which you are all very well versed in for the need for this. And the first is increasing the alignment between SACOG, MTC, and SJCOG to reflect the mega regional work that you all are doing and just heard about. And then to help with the implementation of the RAISE grant and improved community engagement. We are hopeful that the state is going to see the benefit of this legislation, as it is so focused, I think, on implementation across borders, if you will, right? Like these issues are regional in nature, but they are mega regional in nature. The state is very much focused on bringing as many federal dollars to the state of California as possible and making those dollars effective in meeting the state and regional goals. And then lastly, community engagement to improve equity, accessibility, all of the things that go into engaging the SACOG communities. It represents to really develop a plan that reflects the community's needs and desires. The next steps, we are going to be heard in Assembly Transportation Committee in late March. I think Chris was saying he was communicating with staff last week, and it might not be until the 22nd or 27th, something to that effect. That is a really late hearing. But on the benefit of that is we have some additional time to do the outreach to SACOG's legislative delegation, which is underway, as well as engaging supportive groups, regional, local, and statewide. We have already secured a half a dozen organizations in support of the bill and have a long list of folks that we're going to be outreaching to ensure robust support that really spans the spectrum of types of organizations that would support something like this, right? It's not just the cities and the county and SACOG supporting it, but it's your business communities, your non-governmental community-based organizations, environmental and equity-based organizations, labor, the industry, the transportation construction industry, just trying to bring the full breadth of support for that effort. I think this is probably the most important content we're going to deliver today in terms of our update. So I'll just take a quick pause and see if there are questions or comments on that, Chair Thomas.
Any questions or comments? All right.
Okay.
Please proceed.
Absolutely. So there was a decent amount of turnover in the SACOG legislative delegation. 6 of your 12 elected representatives in Sacramento were newly elected in November. This is relatively reflective. It's a little higher than the statewide average, I guess, if you will, of high turnover in the 2022 election by and large. In the assembly, 30% of the body, 30% of the 80 members are newly elected, and 25% of the members in the state Senate are new as well. Back to the assembly really quick, we're going to have an interesting time later this summer with the transition of Speaker Anthony Rundin over to Assembly Member Robert Rivas. That's scheduled to take place in the middle of July. In the meantime, the speaker and the speaker soon-to-be speaker have sort of reached an informal agreement that there aren't going to be significant changes to committee chairpersonships and other things in leadership. So things are pretty much as they were about this time last year and through the 2022 legislative session. That could change in July. I will point out that there is a new budget subcommittee 3 chair, Assemblymember Steve Bennett from Ventura County, who is engaged in his regional of government in Southern California along the coast there. So we think that is a really good appointment to replace Assemblymember Bloom, who vacated that position after a number of years. And then in the Senate, again, minimal committee leadership. We expect the pro tem Tony Atkins to remain in that position through the end of this legislative session, and then we'll likely see a new pro tem at the end of the year. And there's a new budget sub 4 chair in the Senate, Senator Steve Padilla from the Coachella Valley. We just wanted to put together, this is almost a takeaway, a reference sheet, if you will, of the committees that SACOG's delegation sits on. You have representation on the budget sub 3 committee in the Assembly over transportation issues by Assemblymember Patterson. He also sits as has been appointed vice chair of the Housing Committee. So those are 2 really good appointments. As I had mentioned, Assemblymember Agwar Curry, chair of Local Government Committee, and then Assemblymember Wynn over transportation, or is on transportation, not a leadership position there, but has been appointed to that committee. On the Senate, again, Senator Nilo on the budget sub 4 committee, that's over housing issues. You have Assemblymember Dolly on governance and finance, which is essentially the Senate's local government committee. And then you have really good membership on the Senate Transportation Committee with Senator Nilo serving as vice chair, and then both Senators Dolly and Dodd sit on that committee. So we wanted to chat a little bit. I'm going to do a time check too, forgive me. I have a tendency to be long-winded, and so I just want to make sure I am staying on schedule here. A little bit about what we see is going to be hot button issues in the 23 legislative session. The first of that is the continued implementation of the Governor's Climate Action Plan for Transportation Infrastructure, which was a document put together over the course of the last couple of years, resulting in from an executive order whereby the governor said, maximize for climate purposes existing transportation dollars, particularly those on the state highway system. The most recent activity, or the current activity going on right now, is the development of the Caltrans Strategic Investment Strategy, which is essentially a way for Caltrans to determine whether it wants to support a particular project on the state highway system, or on behalf of a regional government working on the state highway system, whether it sort of meets the climate perspective. So it is a dense topic. It's going to be controversial. We will report back more in the future, so that SACOG, and it's engaging on its own behalf, but Chris and I are involved in all the working groups around the development of that. So to the extent it's going to impact SACOG. We are aware of and continue to be engaged in the search for a replacement to the gas tax, because while SB1 was great, stop the bleeding, if you will, on the city and county road system, helping us improve things from a maintenance perspective, it is ultimately going to be a declining revenue stream with the implementation of zero emission vehicles. And then, as always, the dynamic in housing is very active again in Sacramento, pursuing various carrots and sticks, if you will, with funding eligibility. And this will come up in the budget slide in a little bit, but I'll just say that essentially conditioning your ability to access housing funding based on progress on now, not just housing element implementation, but homelessness issues. So that's a bit of a new twist. In the transportation space, Assemblymember Friedman has reintroduced concepts, two vehicles, AB6 and AB7, that we saw last year, seeking to put some parameters at the state level on regional project selection, implementation, planning, local sales tax measures, what they can and cannot fund. And so we're going to continue to see those conversations happen. And then I will be sitting on Assemblymember Friedman's working group, which kicks off later this week to talk about how those bills are going to take shape going forward. And I believe SACOG will be directly engaged in those conversations as well. As I mentioned, tying homelessness to housing law enforcement, that's going to be a theme. There's some additional conversations, the ongoing forever conversation of
Kiana?
Oh, yes.
On
Yes,
6 and 7, on 6 and 7, is there any changes from last year's legislation, or is it the same bill?
I'm going to forward the slide deck really quick because they are just intent bills right now. So it is, there is no meat on either of these vehicles. They have couched the working groups in a broader context, looking at SB 375 implementation more broadly. But if I'm being very candid, I suspect that the assembly member and the staff want to get to a place where they were last year. But that's just my gut. It's my observation. We'll see if that actually comes to fruition. And I guess I should mention too, Mayor Steinberg and others, I think, are engaging with Friedman directly as well. So there's going to be a lot of Sacramento presence involved in those. And so there's AB7 there really quick too.
Understood. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So yeah, is CEQA impeding housing development or not? I don't know if this will ever be resolved. I think folks have very different perspectives and experiences, but it's on the table again. And so we'll see what happens in the CEQA housing space. Impact fees, there was a number of bills over the last few years to limit or preclude cities and counties from charging impact fees related to infrastructure for new development. Recognize that there's a need to address the cost of housing in the state of California. Not sure limiting cities and counties' ability to provide the infrastructure to support that housing is the way to get there, but we suspect that will be back on the table. Transit operations funding and fiscal cliff, very hot topic right now. The budget slide will touch on this in a moment. With the governor's proposal to essentially rescind $2 billion in TIRCP grants, that is on the capital side, and there's both capital needs and severe operations needs as well. So that's going to be a hot topic. Greenlining Institute is shopping a proposal similar to AB 2419 by Assembly Member. There I go, touching my computer screen. Sorry. Brian, related to Justice 40 initiatives. Last year, that bill was troubling in so much as it was sort of requiring the state to go above and beyond the federal requirements that we see in Justice 40, to the extent that they even want to sort of get into making city and county road maintenance and safety projects sort of meet disadvantaged community standards. And so that can be a delicate subject as you guys are all trying to take care of system-wide, citywide, countywide, region-wide transportation systems. So more to come on that. And then finally, a nod to the full fuel pricing special session. Committees have been appointed. Absolutely nothing has happened. The governor continues to tweet about the need for reform, and we will just have to wait and see what happens there. I've shown those slides, so let me just really quickly wrap it up with an overview of the governor's budget. When the governor released his 23-24 budget on January 10th, he had to close a $22.5 billion budget problem and did so without tapping into reserves, using 5 other budget strategies, if you will. And all of the actions are sort of in one of these 5 tranches. So delaying $7.9 billion in funding, and this is across all policy areas. It's not necessarily transportation or housing. Delaying funding to future years, outright reducing funding to programs, $5.7 billion falls into that category. There's $4.3 billion in fund shifts. And then what they're calling trigger cuts, but really it's trigger restorations, if you will, $3.9 billion. The budget cuts the dollars now. If the budget is doing better this time next year, some of that funding is eligible to be restored. So it's trigger restorations, if you will. And then finally, revenue and borrowing, $1.2 billion worth there. We did go over this at the board meeting, and so happy to answer questions, again, wanting to be respectful of the time we have today. Tying homelessness and housing funding more closely together was something in the governor's budget, and a reduction of $350 million subject to restoration for these 3 programs: California Dream for All, Cal Home, Home Ownership, and ADU Subsidy Program. On the transportation space, I mentioned $2 billion reduction and some funding delays in TIRCP. There is a proposal to backfill $500 million of the $2.7 billion cuts with state highway account dollars. On the one hand, it preserves the active transportation program, whereby last fall, SACOG did incredibly well getting a lot of grants out of that. On the other hand, it could have implications a few years from now on SHOP projects that may impact the region. So that one's a bit of a mixed bag. Let me just say this when it comes to the budget, given the financial situation the state is in, you had the Assembly Chair, Assembly Member Ting, responding that he would rather see us dip into reserves and not cut money already appropriated. Then you had the LAO just a few days later saying, we think the governor didn't do enough and you might need to consider $13 billion in more cuts. So it is so early in an extremely volatile economic budget time. So I'm not putting a ton of this is all very much subject to change, right? And so we have the April tax receipts due, then we're going to see the May revision. And I really think that's when the budget situation is going to kick into high gear. Okay, hopefully I did not run over time, but I got everything out. I'm happy to answer more questions and thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Kiana, for that just very clear, in-depth look at what's going on at the state level. A lot more to come, and this will be a fluid process, no doubt. All right.
Thanks,
Is there
Kiana.
any other director comments or questions?
If there are no questions, just wanted to take some time to really quick touch on the federal side. We're continuing to.
And actually, before you do that, Sabrina, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I need to turn this over to my vice chair.
Oh,
Burris,
that's
as
right.
I do need to speak to my next engagement. So Vice Chair Burris, are you able to take over?
Can you guys hear me? Is my audio working okay?
It sure is. Thank you so much. And I apologize, I have to scoot out, but thank you all. We'll see you next month.
Thank you, Chair Thomas. All right. So we're continuing to advocate on the federal side for funding for Green Means Go, in particular, looking at appropriations requests and earmark requests, and then also commenting on funding guidelines such as the greenhouse gas reduction funds that the EPA has as part of the Inflation Reduction Act. And James recently made a trip back to DC, so I wanted to give him a bit of time to brief you on that. He went to a National Association of Regional Councils conference.
Yeah, thanks, Sabrina. I'll make it brief. It was good to be back there at the beginning of the calendar year and the congressional session. I think the theme at this conference I was at is obviously we know pretty gridlocked in DC with the chamber split. We're going to be hearing, I think, a lot about the infrastructure bill, a lot more continuing in the months ahead, maybe in the State of the Union tomorrow night. But as Sabrina also mentioned, I think the sleeper bill from our perspective and infrastructure is the Inflation Reduction Act, and some pretty major funding programs that are in that, as Sabrina mentioned, that we are really trying to weigh in on and make sure we are at the table shaping the guidelines so that we can be competitive. All we really want to be is eligible and competitive for some of those really big programs. The other theme I will pass along, and you'll, I think, hear this a lot this year in different committees and the board, is there have never been, the good news is there's never been so many competitive grant programs at the federal level for all the things we care about and we work on. The bad news is there's never been so many competitive grant programs at the federal level. They're completely overwhelmed. And I would say, we have a question that we're going to actually talk about at the Strategic Planning Committee this afternoon to the board of SACOG. How can we be more coordinated and more effective when we put all these applications into the federal level? It is not an easy one because it's a great opportunity for all of us to go after things, but it creates confusion, sometimes duplication. And when there are multiple applications, similar applications going after different funding sources, it raises a lot. We're not the only region with this issue, right? But I think given how we want to be competitive at the federal level in these things, I think it really begs a question. I'm going to throw one thought out for you, which it certainly intrigued me as this discussion was going on in the conference I was at. The Cleveland, Ohio region, their MPO, multiple counties, has made a pact that one application goes in from the entire region to each grant program, and the entire region rallies behind that one application. And it is made known to the entire delegation and the two senators that this is their priority, and they're going all in. Now, that is not the norm, I will tell you, around the US, but I do think it's an issue we've never had to deal with before because, as I said, we've never had this many grant programs. I don't know how much of a serious an issue it is yet for us as a region, but I can tell you there's a lot of grant applications going into the feds that even we don't know about, or we know about at the very last second. And I flag that as a challenge for us in general. So I'll end it there.
And I'll close out the item by just mentioning that attachment C are the advocacy procedures that I mentioned in the advocacy principle adoption. So you would you have recommended that the board approve the advocacy principles, which give direction to staff on the types of legislative issues that align with those topic areas. And to the extent there are bills that are outside of those advocacy principles that we think you all might want to engage in, there's a process in which we would come back to this committee if time allows, or if time doesn't allow, that we would work with the committee chair and board chair to make a determination on whether to engage on a legislative issue. So let us know if you have any questions on those as you take a look.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any comments, questions from the board? Okay, seeing none, do we have any public comment on this item?
There's no public comment.
Perfect. Okay, well then I guess we can move on to item 12, accepting the 2023 Sacramento County Investment Policy and Pooled Investment Fund.
So that's a receive and file item.
Okay. So does anybody on the board want to make any comments on it, or do we have any public comment on it?
No public comment on the item.
Perfect. Does anybody on the board have any other matters they want to discuss? Okay, well, if we've got nothing from the board or staff, then we are adjourned.
Thank you very much.
Very efficient, Trinity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Right.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.